Imagine inheriting this massive, sprawling estate from your great-grandfather. You've never actually visited it, but you've always known it was there.
Right, like a backup plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you wake up one morning, you pack a bag to finally go see it, and you find the locks are changed, the gates are bolted, and there's a notice on the door saying you just don't belong there anymore.
It's a rude awakening for a lot of people.
It really is. I mean, for decades, an Italian passport was like this ultimate invisible heirloom. It was a status you could claim simply because of like a line of ink in a municipal record book from 1890. But as of 2026, Italy has completely changed the locks.
Yeah, they haven't just changed the locks, honestly. They've fundamentally rewritten the deed. I mean, the entire philosophy of who gets to hold that passport has been turned upside down over these last 2 years.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking in this deep dive. So for you, the listener, whether you've been plotting a move to Europe, maybe trying to untangle your own family tree, or you just watch global mobility trends, the landscape has completely shifted.
It really has.
We had this massive stack of recent legal updates, consular guidelines, and financial reports from mid-2026 that we're going to dig into. And the central theme here, the big takeaway from all this data, is a huge shift from what used to feel like a genetic lottery to a really strict demand for proximity.
Proximity is, well, it's the perfect word for it, because for a very long time, the Italian government operated on this principle of Jure Sanguinis, right? The right of blood.
Right.
And historically, I mean, that made total sense. When Italy unified back in 1861, millions of Italians started emigrating for economic reasons. The state wanted to keep those diasporas legally tied to the motherland.
So they wanted the descendants to remain Italian no matter where they were born.
Exactly. They wanted that connection. So the law was designed to be, wildly decorous.
Like incredibly generous. Because before the massive reforms hit in March 2025, you could theoretically trace your lineage all the way back to 1861 with 0 generational limits.
None at all.
As long as your great-great-grandfather didn't naturalize in a new country before his kid was born, that chain of citizenship remained intact. You didn't need to speak a word of Italian. You didn't even need to know where Italy was on a map.
But, that historical generosity just collided with modern reality. I mean, consulates around the world became entirely gridlocked.
Just totally paralyzed.
Yeah, the system was overwhelmed by applications from people who, frankly, had absolutely no contemporary cultural or linguistic or even economic ties to the country.
Right, people just looking for a convenient travel document.
Exactly. From a policy standpoint, Italy realized it was handing out millions of these Plan B passports to people who primarily just wanted visa-free access to the broader European Union. They didn't actually want a life in Italy.
Which brings us to the real shockwave in our sources today. Let's get into the mechanics of Law Num 74/20225.
The big one.
Yeah, this went into effect in late March of 2025, and it effectively killed that endless bloodline. So, how exactly does this new generational cutoff work?
So it imposes a strict 2-generation limit. If you are applying today, you cannot just dig up a 19th century birth certificate anymore.
Wow.
You have to have a parent or a grandparent who held exclusively Italian citizenship at the time of your birth or at the time of their death.
And if you don't have that?
If you can't meet that, there is an alternative route, but it's tough. You can claim it if you have a parent who physically lived in Italy for 2 consecutive years prior to your birth.
So they are demanding a tangible recent link. It's either your immediate ancestors were only Italian citizens, or they actually lived in the country.
Right. Proximity.
And anyone hoping this would be, struck down by the courts got a really rude awakening in March 2026. Because the Constitutional Court officially upheld the reform. They ruled that setting a generational boundary on a passport is perfectly legal.
Which solidified the whole thing.
But I have a major question about how this applies to minors. Because looking at these new guidelines, even if I am an officially recognized passport-holding Italian citizen today, if I have a child abroad, they do not automatically get citizenship.
That's right.
Doesn't that contradict the whole core definition of a bloodline, right? I mean, it's my kid.
It does, but it represents this massive philosophical pivot. The state is basically saying that citizenship is no longer this passive inheritance. Under the new rules, if an Italian citizen has a child abroad, the parent must file a formal, active declaration to claim the child's citizenship.
And there are strict deadlines for that, right?
Very strict, unforgiving deadlines. If the child was born before the new law took effect, the parents have until May 2029 to file.
Okay.
And if they're born after, they have exactly 3 years from the date of birth.
I mean, at least the 2026 update made filing that declaration free of charge. But the intent is so clear here. They're forcing parents to make a conscious choice. You have to actively raise your hand and say, I want my child to be part of this nation.
Exactly. It prevents the creation of a whole new generation of, accidental citizens who might discover they hold a passport 30 years from now without ever having interacted with the state. It forces an immediate relationship between the family and the consulate.
But the irony here is that interacting with an Italian consulate has historically been an absolute nightmare.
Oh, totally.
I mean, the front door of dissent has narrowed, but even for those who perfectly fit the new two-generation rule, the bureaucratic line to get through that door is just barely moving.
It's a crawl.
And that bottleneck has birthed an entirely different industry, which is the judicial route. People are taking this out of the consulates and into the courts.
Yeah, the judicial route is arguably the most dynamic area of Italian citizenship law right now. Our sources highlight 2 distinct legal avenues people are using to just bypass the consulates entirely.
Let's start with the first one, which is directly tied to those crazy delays. Because the standard consular appointment system is notoriously broken. You log onto their web portal at midnight, you hit refresh 100 times, and you find 0 available appointments for years.
Right, it's incredibly frustrating. But the Italian Supreme Court...
The Court of Cassation.
Yes, the Court of Cassation, they stepped in on May 12, 2026. This is Order 13818.
Okay, can you break down the mechanics of what the court actually decided there?
Basically, the court recognized that justice delayed is justice denied. Order 13818 established that if an applicant can prove they have faced unreasonable delays, specifically being unable to secure a consular appointment or having an application sit pending for more than 24 months.
2 whole years.
Right. If that happens, they are legally permitted to bypass the administrative system entirely. They can hire representation and sue the government directly in the Italian regional courts to have their citizenship recognized.
Which is an absolute lifeline for people stuck in that bureaucratic purgatory.
Absolutely.
But the second and much older reason people end up in Italian courts is the famous 1948 rule. And the mechanics behind this are just fascinating to me. Before January 1st, 1948, Italian women did not have the legal right to pass their citizenship on to their children. Only men could.
Yeah, and that date is highly significant. January 1st, 1948 is when the modern Constitution of the Italian Republic went into effect, which officially granted women equal rights.
Right.
So constitutionally speaking, a woman born in, say, 1920 absolutely had the right to pass on her citizenship.
But here's the glaring contradiction. Today, in 2026, Italian consulates still follow the pre-1948 administrative code.
It's wild, I know.
If your claim to citizenship goes through a female ancestor who gave birth before 1948, the consulate will automatically reject your application. They literally look at your paperwork, see a woman's name in that era, and just deny you.
Without a second thought.
Why on earth hasn't the Italian parliament just updated the administrative guidelines for the consulates? Why force descendants to sue the government over a constitutional right that was established 80 years ago?
Because retroactively rewriting a century of administrative code is a total legislative minefield. Parliament has just avoided touching it, which leaves this massive disconnect between constitutional law and consular policy.
So they're just ignoring it.
Pretty much. The consulates are bound by their specific administrative rulebook, which says no. But the courts are bound by the Constitution, which says yes.
So getting a rejection from the consulate is essentially just your ticket into the courtroom.
Precisely. And this gets to the core of how the Italian legal system actually views citizenship. The courts define it as a fundamental, permanent, and imprescriptible legal status.
Meaning it's a human right.
Exactly. It's an inherent human right. It cannot be erased by the passage of time, and it certainly cannot be erased by a slow, outdated bureaucracy.
So when you file a 1948 lawsuit, which usually takes, about 12 to 24 months to resolve?
Roughly.
What is actually happening in that courtroom? Because you weren't asking the judge to grant you a new citizenship, are you?
Not at all. And that is a crucial distinction. In the eyes of the court, you are already an Italian citizen, and you always have been.
Wow.
The lawsuit is a restorative action. You are petitioning the judge to formally recognize an inherent status that the state unlawfully ignored. You're asking the court to order the government to register the citizenship you held from the moment you were born.
It's an incredibly powerful legal concept. You're just forcing the state to acknowledge a reality that already exists.
Exactly.
But what happens when the reality is that the state actively and legally stripped your citizenship away? Because there is a whole demographic of people who actually held this status and lost it through no fault of their own.
Oh, you're referring to the pre-1992 naturalization rules.
Yeah.
And this is arguably the most time-sensitive revelation in the 2026 data we are analyzing.
Yeah, the paperwork casualties, as I like to think of them. Because prior to August 16, 1992, Italy had incredibly strict rules against dual citizenship. The government's philosophy during the Cold War era was heavily focused on singular national loyalty.
Largely due to military conscription laws at the time.
Right. So if an Italian citizen had moved to the United States, or Australia, or Argentina, and naturalized to become a citizen of their new home, Italy automatically revoked their Italian passport. They were stripped of their heritage simply for participating in the civic life of their new country.
Which resulted in hundreds of thousands of Italians losing their citizenship. And previously, the only way to get it back was to physically move to Italy and establish residency for a full year.
Which is impossible for most people.
Right. But LAWNUP 742025 created a highly specific temporary amnesty window.
Okay, so this window opened on July 1st, 2025, and it slammed shut on December 31st, 2027. If you are one of these individuals who lost your citizenship before 1992, you can now get it back.
Yep, it costs a €250 fee. You make an in-person declaration to a consular official. And the massive change here is that the residency requirement is completely gone.
That's huge.
It really is. You do not have to uproot your life and move to Rome for a year to reclaim your status.
It's a remarkable concession by the government. But we really have to look at how tightly they engineered this loophole to prevent it from being abused.
Oh, they were very careful.
Right, because my immediate thought when reading this was, okay, if an 80-year-old grandfather goes to the consulate tomorrow and gets his Italian passport back, does that magically reopen the bloodline? Can all of his foreign-born kids and grandkids suddenly say, hey, my grandfather's Italian, give me a passport, completely bypassing that strict new two-generation cutoff we talked about earlier?
No, the law preemptively blocks that. The legal mechanism of reacquisition is strictly non-retroactive. Your citizenship is officially reinstated on the day after you make the declaration.
So it doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't mean you were officially Italian for the last 40 years.
Correct. And crucially, it does not automatically cascade down the family tree to children born abroad. The only scenario where a minor child inherits the reacquired citizenship is if that child is physically living in Italy, cohabiting with the parent, and has maintained lawful residence there for at least 2 years.
Wow. They really thought of everything.
They did.
It constantly points back to that concept of proximity. They are willing to right a historical wrong for the specific individual who lost their passport, but they refuse to let that act spawn a dozen new citizens who have never set foot in the country.
Exactly. The ancestral door really is sealed.
Which leaves us with the final set of options. For you listening, if you have zero Italian blood, no grandparents to claim, and no historical paperwork errors to reverse, you are basically left with two paths. You either bring significant capital or you put in a decade of time. Let's examine the capital route first, the 2026 Golden Visa, which is officially called the Investor Visa.
Right, so the investment tiers are highly structured, and they reveal a lot about Italy's current economic strategy. You have 4 distinct routes to secure residency. You can invest €250,000 in an innovative Italian startup.
Okay.
You can invest $500,000 in a standard Italian limited company. You can make a €1 million philanthropic donation to support public interest projects. Or you can purchase $2 million in Italian government bonds.
So the barrier to entry range is wildly based on where you put the money. I mean, why does the government value a startup investment at half the price of a standard corporate investment?
It really comes down to risk engineering. The state is deliberately trying to inject venture capital into high-risk, high-reward sectors, like tech and green energy. Startups struggle to find early-stage funding.
Sure.
So by discounting the visa threshold to $250,000 for innovative companies, Italy is incentivizing foreign wealth to take on that early-stage risk, hoping to spur domestic job creation and technological advancement.
Makes sense.
If you want the safer route of investing in an established traditional company, the state demands double the capital.
That makes perfect economic sense. But there is a glaring omission in this list compared to almost every other golden visa program in Europe. Real estate.
Ah, yes.
Why does Italy deliberately ban foreign investors from buying, a fancy coastal villa in exchange for residency? Do they want millions of euros flowing to their property markets?
Well, looking at the broader European context, inflating the property market is exactly what Italy is trying to avoid. Over the last decade, Portugal and Spain operated these incredibly lucrative golden visa programs heavily tied to real estate.
Right, and people flock there.
They did, but the result was catastrophic for local residents. Billions in foreign capital flooded Lisbon, Porto, Madrid, and Barcelona. It drove up housing prices astronomically, displacing the local workforce and triggering massive housing crises.
So they basically priced their own citizens out of their own cities.
Yes. Spain had to completely close its real estate route in April 2025, and Portugal removed property from its program entirely. Italy watched this happen and designed its investor visa as an economic defense mechanism.
So they want the money, but on their terms.
Exactly. They are happy to welcome foreign wealth, but they mandate that the capital must flow into the working economy, like businesses, sovereign debt, philanthropy. They absolutely refuse to let foreign visa seekers commodify the domestic housing supply.
That is a really fascinating strategy to protect the local population while still courting foreign wealth. And speaking of courting wealth, we have to talk about the tax implications for these new residents, because the landscape shifted dramatically on January 1st, 2026. Italy has this famous flat tax aimed at ultra-high net worth individuals moving to the country.
Yes, the flat tax.
I like to think of it as a financial quarantine zone. Instead of taxing a billionaire's global wealth piece by piece, Italy just throws a blanket over all their foreign-sourced income and says, pay this one flat fee, and we won't even look at what's underneath.
That quarantine zone analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of it. The policy was originally introduced to attract wealthy expats who might otherwise go to, say, Switzerland or Monaco, and the original flat tax was 100,000 euros per year.
But the new 2026 data shows a massive hike. It jumped from 100,000 to 300,000 euros per year, plus an additional 50,000 for every family member attached to the application. I mean, why triple the cost overnight?
Honestly, because the program was actually too successful. Yeah, it attracted a huge influx of high net worth individuals, particularly to places like Milan, which ironically began causing the exact localized cost of living spikes the government was trying to avoid with the real estate ban.
Oh, wow. So they inadvertently caused a problem anyway.
Right. The political backlash grew, so the government tripled the price. They are capitalizing on the high demand by extracting 3 times the revenue for the state treasury while simultaneously cooling off the sheer volume of applicants.
It's all a really delicate balancing act of supply, demand, and public optics.
Yeah.
But let's say you don't have €500,000 to drop into a startup, and you don't need a financial quarantine zone for your global wealth. You just want to immigrate the traditional way. This is citizenship by residency or naturalization, the putting in the time route.
And the time commitment is substantial. For non-EU citizens, the baseline requirement is 10 years of continuous legal residency in Italy.
Which is one of the longest naturalization timelines in Western Europe.
It really is.
There was actually a push to change this recently, right? Our sources detail a national referendum held in June 2025 that attempted to drop the requirement from 10 years down to 5 years.
Yes, there's a lot of momentum behind that.
It garnered a ton of headlines, but ultimately failed to meet the required voter turnout quorum, meaning that decade-long wait remains the law of the land.
10 years of physical presence is just the foundation, too. The state also requires applicants to prove a minimum income threshold, which sits firmly at €8,263 and 31 cents per year, basically proving you are not a burden on the state's social systems.
Yeah.
But the most rigorous hurdle is the language mandate. You must prove an intermediate B1 level of fluency in Italian.
And looking at the mechanics of this requirement, it is incredibly strict. You can't just show them a 500-day streak on a language learning app.
Whoa, definitely not.
You have to pass a formalized exam from one of exactly 5 authorized institutions under the CLIQ system. What does that actually entail?
So, CLIQ stands for Certificazione Lingua Italiana di Qualità. It is a centralized, state-approved consortium of institutions, like the Dante Alighieri Society and the University for Foreigners in Siena and Perugia.
Right.
By funneling all applicants through this highly regulated testing system, the government ensures that the B1 standard isn't just a rubber stamp. You are tested on reading comprehension, written production, listening, and an unscripted oral interview.
It's a genuine test of integration. They are verifying that you can actually navigate Italian society. That you can read a lease, converse with a doctor, and really participate in the civic life of your community.
Which brings us full circle to the underlying philosophy driving every single regulation we've discussed today. The language requirement, the investment routes, the 24-month court bypass, the 2-generation limit. They are all mechanisms designed to enforce proximity.
The era of the invisible heirloom is definitively over. If you want an Italian passport in 2026, the government demands a real, active, and measurable commitment. Whether you are actively declaring citizenship for your newborn to beat a 2029 deadline, or fighting in a regional court to force recognition of 1948 right, injecting €250,000 into a local startup, or sitting for a rigorous CLIQ language exam, you have to prove you are invested in the reality of the country, not just the romance of it.
It fundamentally changes the relationship between the individual and the state. And it leaves us with a compelling philosophical shift to consider as we look at global mobility moving forward. As nations like Italy pivot away from a paradigm of citizenship based purely on historical bloodlines and move toward a model based on current economic and cultural contribution, what does that actually do to our definition of a nation?
Are we moving toward a world where nationality operates more like a subscription service, a status we earn, buy, and must actively maintain through continued participation, rather than a permanent inherited identity we are simply born into? It's an invisible heirloom that you now have to pay the upkeep on. Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.